The teardown continues for the New York Jets as they rip this thing apart and hopefully build it back up. A major trade here. We weren't supposed to bring in a second episode this week, but here we are because Jermaine Johnson is heading to the Tennessee Titans in exchange for Javonte Sweat. There's a lot to get to about this trade. We'll talk about the salary cap implications, what it means for the Jets defense, the positioning, all that stuff. But Zach, what a nice one for you on the way to the airport today on your way back from Indy.
Yeah, I appreciate them doing it then and not like at an inconvenient time. So that was good. But I did, there were some rumblings of Jermaine as a possible trade guy. I literally didn't even have enough time to dig into them because this trade happened like way earlier than these things usually do. Like this doesn't usually happen this early. It can't technically go through until the league year on March 11th. So it's not going to be official for a little bit. But yeah, mildly surprising, but kind of makes sense for both parties if you think about it, which we'll get into. But the offseason that we love is off to a great start. We got we got a trade right away, and we called this as the offseason we wanted back. And now, Darren Muji, Trader Darren, is giving us some content to podcast about. So we appreciate it.
All right, let's start with what the Jets are getting, and that is Sweat, who is 6'2", 366 pounds. If you see the picture on the thumbnail of this episode or the YouTube link, he is a massive mountain of a guy. 38th overall pick in 2024. They lost some run blocking ability, obviously, with the Quinnen trade. You plug him in there. How do you see this fit for this team?
Yeah, in terms of Sweat, he's a really fun flyer to take. I mean, it's more than a flyer, I guess, because you traded Jermaine, who was a starting edge. But as they transition to a little bit different of a style of defense, he brings something that they don't really have. Like Harrison Phillips is like a run stopper type, but he's not like a nose tackle in the way that T'Vondre Sweat is. Like you're probably not going to be playing Sweat a lot on passing downs. But he's like you said, he's huge. He's 366 pounds. He's a good athlete. Really good run stopper. Like according to PFF's grading, he was one of the 5 best run stoppers out of all defensive tackles in the NFL last year. I know there's some off the field stuff that was like a red flag for him coming out of college, but I actually pulled up Dane Brugler's scouting report about him because he was drafted recently enough that it's still relevant. And I'll read the summary at the end. It says, overall, Sweat must continue turning the brilliant flashes into more consistency, but he's a rare athlete for his size with the power and ingredients to be a dominant force against the run. Though he has the traits to be an impactful NFL starter, he needs to stay conditioned and locked in to reach his potential. So, he's not someone that's ever going to play 70% of the snaps. I think he played 50% of them last year, maybe even a little bit less for the Titans. He wasn't a good fit in Saleh's defense, which is a really attacked defense. And that's why it seemed like the Titans were probably going to get rid of him. Saleh praised him in a press conference a day or two ago. So as we remember from the Saleh days, Saleh talking about something, the opposite often happens. But yeah, I like it. I like this trade broadly. I know, we're going to get into the Jermaine side of it next, I'm sure. But they had chances to trade Jermaine at the deadline and they rejected the trade offers. And I think one of the offers was a 3rd round pick. And so you look now, would you rather T'Vondre Sweat, who has shown something in the NFL, or would you rather take in the swing on a 3rd round pick? At the time, Jermaine was still a valued part of this team. He had a really bad stretch at the end of the season. And there's some other stuff I'll talk about in a bit. But I like this trade. I like beefing up. This does open up another hole on the team, which was there anyway. But now it's really there where Will McDonald is your only edge left. Which is funny because as I wrote in a story I published today, if you remember in 2023, everybody was pissed that they drafted him because they were loaded at the end at the time. They had JFM, they had Bryce Huff, they had Carl Lawson, and they had Jermaine Johnson. And they drafted Will McDonald instead of Jackson Smith and Nick Jigba, and fans were pissed off. And now we're here in 2026, and Will McDonald's the last man standing. So congrats.
Yeah, although that other guy's pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, JSN, you mean? Yeah. He's not bad. Yeah.
That might have still been the better move at that point, if you think about how that pairing could be with him and Garrett. Okay, let's get into Jermaine. Did you feel like this was a move where the writing was on the wall, or you said you were surprised, but just talk about the Jermaine Johnson of it all, and he obviously reunites with Saleh down there in Tennessee, a guy that drafted him.
I was more surprised that like when it happened. Like there wasn't enough. Like there was, like I said, there were rumblings, but there wasn't like buzz that like there's this huge market for Jermaine Johnson or whatever. So I was surprised in that sense. But I mean, if he was ever going to get traded, the Titans makes the most sense. Obviously, they have Robert Saleh, they have Aaron Whitecotton. In terms of like the Jet side of it, like he did not have a good season, and you could say he was coming off an Achilles, which is absolutely true, but he's also going into the last year of his contract. So you have to decide. Darren Mugier and Glenn, they had to decide right now, like, do we believe he can get back to form, or should we try and capitalize on having him on our team right now and go and get somebody? And they chose the latter. And I think that was ultimately the right move, because Jermaine just, by the end of the season, he was just a complete non-factor. Like he only had, I think, 2 or 3 sacks and only a few QB hits. He was invisible some weeks. I had this in my story, but he was butting heads with Eric Washington, the D-line coach, and I don't think him and Wilkes particularly big fans of each other. And I think Jermaine Johnson was outspoken at times in like team meetings and things like position meetings, and I believe that's what led to him. There was a game, I believe it was against the Jaguars, that he didn't start, and he only played like 40% of the snaps. And I'm pretty sure it was because of the conversations that were going on in those meeting rooms, and ultimately, like, Jermaine said all the right things publicly in terms of like supporting Aaron Glenn, wanting to be part of the change. But from what I understand, like he was telling people that he was not really happy being a Jet and that he didn't really want to be here anymore. So, at the end, he's not going out with like, I don't think anybody is. I get it, it's been an interesting reaction, because I think at the deadline when there was rumors about him getting traded, fans were pissed off. Now that he's traded, I don't think anybody's pissed off, and I don't think anybody like hates Jermaine by any stretch, or like it's a very like, okay, we made an interesting trade and now we brought in somebody younger. And so I think for both parties it was the best move. Jermaine will be in his best possible position. There's some funny like Nashville Titans like aspects to this outside of Saleh, because number one, the Jets traded up to get Jermaine Johnson in that 2022 draft, of which 2 of the 3 first-round picks are gone now, by the way. But they traded up, and the team they traded up with was the Titans. So they used the Titans pick to get Jermaine. In 2023, Jermaine Johnson tears his Achilles, which leads to them wanting to trade him now. He tears his Achilles in Nashville against the Titans. So it's all circling around the Titans and the Jets, and it's probably going to happen a lot now with Saleh there and that staff full of Jets coaches. But I don't know. It's just wild thinking back about that 2022 class, which everybody viewed at the time as an all-time class, and on paper it still is if you just think about like the quality of players, but there's not really long-lasting tenures going on in this. I mean, this especially this free agency class, because you're probably going to let Michael Clemens walk out the door, Max Mitchell, who knows. You have Tony Adams is going to leave. He was an undrafted rookie that year. Breece Hall is probably going to come back, I would guess, on a tag. I'll get into that more on Monday when I do my what I'm hearing column. I've heard some stuff about that, but this is a Jermaine Johnson pod, and they traded him away, traded Sauce away. Garrett is kind of the last man standing, basically, from a class that was supposed to be like the thing that changed this organization.
Yeah, and they've traded away 8 of 11 first-round picks from 2015 to 2022. And you made one other good point here is he's going to be a free agent, and this team's not going to win next year. So, and then you're going to lose him. So just, you're probably not going to get as much for him if you try to trade him when, during this year or whatever. So the timing, when you think about it that way, I think makes sense. I'll throw this up for you on YouTube from Jake. Jake says, Zack navigates the combine unlike any other, baby. Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it.
I went on Jake's show yesterday. Always good to talk to Jake, Long Island guy. As Maniacs love him, and we hope to get the baggage handlers as passionate as those, I would say. So there you
go. Cap space. That's another factor here. The Jets already had a big bag of cash to spend this offseason. Sweat will count as $1.7 million against their cap, as opposed to Jermaine. I think they save, it's over $10 million, right? What they're getting in this trade, basically, for next year.
Yeah. So they're going to be around like $90 million in cap space, which is a good chunk of cash, I would say.
Yeah. So that's another part of this. Sorry, mental breakdown.
No, you're good.
Let's talk about filling the role, right? Because you mentioned there's only one guy left, Will McDonald. And we had talked about like are they going to pick up his 5th-year option? I mean, you almost have to now when he's
Yeah.
the only defensive end in house, but they obviously can't go into the season there. So who are some targets we should start thinking about, whether it's in the draft, and maybe that becomes a bigger concern in the draft, and you're looking that way earlier on in the draft, and then also the free agent class coming up.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with free agency because that's first. You dig there are some intriguing edge rushers in this class. The problem you can run into is teams tend to overpay edge rushers in free agency. Guys in free agency get overpaid in general, but like if an edge rusher is hitting free agency, there's like probably a reason. And so, do you want to spend the amount you have to do? Like the star in this class is Trey Hendrickson. I don't think he's coming to the Jets, and I don't think they want to pay him what he wants. So I think you can eliminate that. Odafe Owe is very interesting. He got traded to the Chargers and he played really well. I think he had like 7.5 sacks and he had 3 in that playoff game. He's not like a dominant pass rusher, but he's a good like guy coming off the edge, outside linebacker type of thing. If they go to more 3-4, which we can get into. But I think from what I hear from the combine, I think he's going to command like $25 million a year or more, and that's a lot of money. Boy May from the Seahawks is interesting to me because he hasn't really had the sack production, but he has shown some like flashes of talent. Popper projected him 4 years, $73 million. The one that I have my eye on is from the Lions, Al-Qadim Muhammad. He had a breakout year last year, 11 sacks. He had 53 pressures. I've said this. I think they're going to make a concerted effort to bring in some guys who know Aaron Glenn and his defense and stuff like that. And he played for Aaron Glenn, I believe, for a year or two. And Popper only projects him for 2 years, $18 million, which is perfectly reasonable. And I do think Muji is more of the type to just get a lot of guys in the middle tier of the market as opposed to like attacking the top of it, which we're going to find out this offseason if that's true. But I just based on what I know about him and just looking at last offseason, just because they have 90 million doesn't necessarily mean they're going to throw like 30 of it at the top guy in free agency, is what I would say. JFM is going to come up,
man. Spread it around.
Yeah, JFM is going to come up, and he's interesting just because he's versatile in his ties. But if he wanted to come back to the Jets for a bit, like he liked the idea of returning here, and he never wanted to leave. But since then, they've gotten rid of all the coaches, and all of his friends are gone now. So like Quinnen and Jermaine were probably the last vestiges of his friends in that locker room. So I don't know how much he's dying to play here, and if they're going to be willing to pay over 20 a year for him. And then there's some other like guys like Joseph Asai, K'Lavon Chaisson, I don't know how to say that, Draymond Jones, Kwity Paye, Arden Key. There's some like middle tier guys that makes sense. And then the draft, like even before
the obvious one in the draft, right, is Arvell Reese.
Yeah, exactly. So even if they hadn't traded Jermaine, they probably were picking an edge at 2. That's just the way this draft is playing out. Caleb Downs is still a possibility, obviously, but now that you trade away Jermaine, I think you sign a free agent for a decent amount of money, and you also draft number 2. And I think the 2 that really feel like the finalists to me at this early juncture would be Arvell and David Bailey. Arvell Reese, he's testing as a linebacker and edge at the combine. I'm very curious to see what like his 40 time and all that stuff looks like. I continue to think he has the highest ceiling, whereas I think you have a little more proven production with David Bailey. He had I think like 13 sacks last year and 18.5 tackles for loss. Good fit if you're doing more of a 3-4. So, I do think this isn't the best draft to have the number 2 pick because even those guys, like none of these guys are like no doubt can't miss prospects, but like Arvell has the best potential to become that. So I still lean Arvell Reese being the guy, I would say.
And Michael Dunn, I don't know if he didn't tune in to our last pod, but said, did you say Arvell? Isn't it just Vel now? But we did talk about that right on the last show that they messed it up
Paul
at
said,
the combine.
Yeah, Paul was paying attention to the press conference, and I guess he said he doesn't know why they did that. So, yeah, it's just Arvell.
Just Arvell. Let's stick with that. There's been some chatter, and I think we glossed over it, but the 3-4 thing, right? And the fact that even though Aaron Glenn seems to not want to commit to that, like, what does this tell us about that?
Yeah, so the thing that they keep emphasizing is that it's going to be a multiple defense. So like calling it a 3-4 wouldn't necessarily be completely accurate because it's going to be how he said this on. We were asking him a lot about his play calling and the coaching changes, and we were kind of cut off from being able to ask him much more. So we didn't get to ask him about the scheme, but he said this on the Jets official podcast. He said ultimately the crux of it is going to be a lot of things we did in Detroit. I think that allows us to be really multiple when it comes to who we are. It's a 4-3 personnel. We can use 3-4 principles. We can be 4-3 if we want to, and that's a good thing about it. So like the idea is they're going to be able to run all these different kind of schemes, and so that's why I like having a Sweat where you can, when you want to do a 3-4, you rotate them in. Will McDonald's a guy I think that could play down and up. Arvell Reese is a guy like that. David Bailey is probably a guy like that. So I think looking at the versatile players in free agency and the draft is kind of the way to think about it. Even more than the 3-4, like guys that can play up and down, guys that can, play multiple spots in the secondary, guys that can play inside linebacker and outside and things like that. So that's where it is. But, based on the coaching additions and Sweat and getting rid of Jermaine, like it does feel like there's going to be more of a 3-4 emphasis than we've seen the last few years.
One last question for you, and that is this it? Are they done with the teardown for now? Are there going to be other trades here as we get closer to free agency? How do you see this playing out there?
Yeah, let me just pull up their roster real quick. So I'd say they don't have a lot of other guys that would be appealing and trade, and they're not trading Garrett Wilson, so you can quell that. I'm sure fans on other teams are all probably like, oh, they're trading everybody. I'm sure they're going to trade Garrett Wilson next. So that's what happened at the deadline too. They're just not doing that. But the one I have my eye on is Jamie Sherwood. He had a really bad season. I don't know how much value he had, but you could save some money if you trade him. Not that they need to. Like if you trade him before June 1st, you save $1.5 million, $10 million dead cap. Not ideal, but if you don't believe in him, and let's say they invest in Alex Anzalone, who would have the green dot and he'd be the main inside linebacker. I don't know, it's something to consider. Or if the Browns just hired Mike Rutenberg, Saleh in Tennessee, you have Jeff Ulbrich in Atlanta. Like if any of them want Sherwood, those guys all love him. So I just have that's on my radar. I'm not saying I think they're shopping him by any means, but I don't think they would say no if a team called, is what I would say.
All right. Well, this has been fun. One note from the chat, another one from Michael Dunn, who says, nice of the Jets to make news on a day where Zack isn't hungover.
Yeah, that's not completely accurate.
That's not fair. That's not fair. It's not hungover, Michael. It's working hard at the combine.
Yes, working hard, so hard that it hurts.
Yeah, and you lose your voice. It happens. You're talking loudly in filled rooms, and you sound like that.
I spent the last month. I spent the last month before the combine like alone in my apartment, so I wasn't talking to anybody. So now I'm talking to too many people. So
yeah, it goes. It sounds good though. It's a raspy,
Yeah, there you go.
Anything else you want to add? We're good. I think we're good.
I think we should be good. I mean, knowing the Jets, they'll come back with some other breaking news for us to cover. But we'll probably come back with you guys at some point in the next week or two.
Yeah, I do want to get Paul couldn't join us today, but I do want to get Paul's perspective on this too next week. So that'll be good. And we'll talk to everybody soon. Thank you for joining into this bonus episode of Flight Plan. We'll talk to everybody soon.